What's up guys, and welcome to my 4.4 updated Sparxie guide. In this video I'm taking you over everything you do need to know in order to understand and builder, including a kit overview, best Lightcones, best Relic sets and Planar ornaments, the main stat and substat goals, and at the very end some general team building ideas for Sparxie. Stuck grinding in Honkai style? Need stellar Jades fast? We've got you covered. Head over to U7 Buy, your ultimate gaming hub for save, fast, and cheap in-game top-ups. Whether it's Starrel or your other favorite games, U7 delivers instantly and players love it. Check out their Trustpilot reviews. They're actually top ranked. On the Honkai Starrel top-up page, you can recharge your account in seconds. When you head over to the page, all you need to do is pick the pack you do want, enter your UID and server, and buy now. If you want codes and coupons to apply, be sure to create an account for proper savings. USD is a recommended usage currency for best saving. Once everything is set, you can see the savings you're about to get. Want even extra savings? Be sure to use code PRESR at checkout for 5% off. Perfect for last minute pulls or surprising a friend. Click on the link in the description, recharge fast, save more, and keep blazing those trails. Sparxie's basic attack is a generic, does fire damage based upper attack to a designated enemy. Her skill transforms her basic attack to an enhanced basic attack and also trigger the engagement farming one time. You can trigger engagement farming up to 20 times, and using the ability is not considered as using a skill. Engagement farming is able to increase the multiplier against one designated enemy by 20% and adjust on targets by 10% for the enhanced basic attack. Each proc also will randomly give you either 2 punchline and 2 skill points or just 1 punchline, and using this ability as well is not considered a skill. The enhanced basic attack will do fire damage based off her attack to a designated enemy and fire damage to adjacent targets. Her ultimate gives 2 punchline points and then does fire damage equal to 0.6 times elation plus 50% of Sparxie's attack to all enemies. For talent, while Sparxie does hold certified banger, her enhanced basic attack can do 40% fire elation damage to a designated enemy and 20% fire elation damage to the adjacent targets, and every instance of engagement farming being triggered will make the enhanced basic attack do an extra instance of 20% fire elation damage to a random attack target, and also the ultimate will do 48% fire elation damage to all enemies. Her technique blocks enemies for 10 seconds. Entering combat by attacking a blocked enemy will do fire damage equal to 50% of Sparxie's attack to all enemies and recover 2 skill points. Her elation skill does 50% fire elation damage to all enemies, and then will additionally do 20 instances of damage, with each doing 25% fire elation damage to a random enemy, and will give Sparxie 2 thrill points, where thrill can be used to offset skill point consumption. For her traces, her A2 will increase Sparxie's elation by 5% up to a maximum of 80% for every 100 attack that exceeds 2000. Her A4 is able to make Sparxie's ultimate generate more punchline and also thrill depending on the amount of elation characters on the team. For 1, 2, 3 elation characters, you can generate 2, 4, 8 punchline and 1, 1, 4 thrill. And her A6 will increase the team's crit damage by 8% up to 80% for every punchline owned. For Eidolons, her E1 will give 5 punchline when AHA instant ends, and every 1 punchline will increase the team's all-type res pen by 1.5% up to 15%. Her E2 gives Sparxie an extra turn and 2 thrill when AHA instant ends, and every thrill stack consumed will now increase Sparxie's crit damage by 10% for 2 turns that stacks up to 4 times. Her E4 also lets Sparxie's ultimate now gain 5 more punchline and also a 36% increase to elation for 3 turns, and her E6 will increase her all-type res pen by 20% and also will make every punchline taken into account for the elation skill to increase the additional damage instances by that elation skill by 1 up to 40. For Lightcones, this ultimately has not really changed, with the rest still being her own signature, providing 48% crit damage for the wearer, a skill point limit increase for every elation character on the team, defense ignore for the elation damage dealt by the unit holding this Lightcone, by consuming skill points up to 4, and consuming 4 or more skill points in the same turn will be able to give the wearer stream promo, which increases the team's elation by 20%. Crit damage buff is of course nice to have. 48% is also a good amount, so you can focus a lot more on the other stats needed. Also, the skill point limit is very good, since the more you have, the more she can consume, the more damage she can do on her main DPS teams, or more actual loot box proc chances you would have on the Silverwolf team, so on and so forth. So just the upper limit increase is going to be good there, even if you don't have the full effect for like the main DPS team where it's just Sparxie and also Yao Guang. So you're 1 below the limit, that's still going to be fine. More is going to be better. On top of that, also up to a 20% defense ignore increase, which is going to be fantastic for damage when you pair this alongside all the other defense ignore sources, such as her best in slot relic set, which we'll get into in a second, And then if you have stuff like Yaoguang E1, so on and so forth, it becomes that much stronger. And also consuming 4 or more skill points in the same turn, which is absolute child's play for Sparxie, as she consumes quite literally all the ones you have. I'd be more concerned if you didn't consume more than 4. You're also giving everyone on the team 20% elation. So more elation damage will be dealt by the team and Sparxie herself. So for best performance, her signature is still far and none the best. Other than that, it would be the Battle Pass Lightcone, providing 12% crit rate and also 12% elation when using an elation skill for 2 turns. At S5, it's 20% crit rate and 20% elation. Very simple, the crit rate is going to make her easier to build for having a healthy crit ratio, since Sparxie does want to have that, and a further elation increase when using elation skill, which will stack up to 2 times, so you can get up to 40% elation when you do have this S5, which is very, very solid for damage. So this is another really good DPS cone you can use on Sparxie. And then the free-to-play option would still go to Mushishirumi's Adventures with a 12% elation increase and 6% elation vulnerability for 2 turns when using an elation skill, and an S5, 20% elation and 10% elation vulnerability. Very simple, any form of elation damage with this elation increase is just going to do more damage. And then for any time you are doing elation damage, which is going to be all of Sparxie's damage pretty much, the vulnerability would be applying to that. The beauty of this light cone, as I always mention, is you can use this on multiple characters. So you can have this on your Yaoguang and still have this on your Sparxie, so it is able to stack up. So for free-to-play options, this is the one you would use. And then for Relic sets, her best in slot still does remain 4-piece Ever Glorious, no matter the team for main DPS or sub DPS. A crit damage increase from the 2-piece, and the 4-piece provides 10% defense ignore for elation damage, with every 5 accumulated punchline that the team does gain, further increasing the elation damage defense ignore value by 1% that stacks up to 10 times. So you can get up to a 20% defense ignore with this actual Relic set. 2-piece is just good to have more crit damage. 4-piece, 20% defense ignore, especially if you have a signature, and as I mentioned previously, stuff like Yaoguang's E1, the further the value does become. The higher defense ignore it does get, it does significantly increase the higher the values do go. So for best performance, no matter what role, 4-piece Ever Glorious is still the one you want to use, and unfortunately past that there isn't an option really. It would just be using 2-piece until you do have a suitable 4-piece Ever Glorious set, so you mainly would just combine 2-piece of attack with 2-piece crit, since the attack can be converted to elation if you don't hit the limit. But if that's useful to you, it depends on your build and what team you're running her on. So if you don't need the attack, you would instead run 2-piece crit. If you need crit rate, it's Scholar or World Making Deliver for 8% crit rate, and crit damage would be 2-piece Ever Glorious or 2-piece Wave Strider for 16% crit damage. For Planar Ornaments, you just want to run the Tengoku set, as it does provide 16% crit damage, and consuming 3 or more skill points in the same turn will additionally increase the wearer's crit damage by 32% for 3 turns, so up to a 48% crit damage. This is overall the best and most consistent for her playstyle, since you're consuming a bunch more than 3 usually, and there's never really a case where you'll be consuming less than 3, so 48% crit damage for practically the entire battle. However, you also can use the Punk Lord set on her, which provides 8% elation, and reaching 40%/80% elation for the first time in combat will increase the wearer's crit damage by 20%/32%. So the extra little elation bump there, and also reaching 80% elation in battle, no matter her team, as long as you do have some elation form going, especially just Yaoguang and she's always on the teams, that's not really going to be a problem for requirements. So it does provide less crit damage than Tengoku, but instead it's a bit of elation. The set does perform very slightly worse, but if you happen to have a really good Punk Lord set and nothing for Tengoku, you can definitely use the Punk Lord set instead. Izumo is also usable for 12% attack and 12% crit rate when someone on the team follows the same path as the wearer, as the 12% attack can be converted to elation and help you reach that 3600 attack goal you would want, and the extra crit rate makes her easier to build. On the main DPS teams, you always have Yaoguang. On the Silver Wolf team, there's Silver Wolf and Yaoguang, so you're always going to have the effect active. So if this helps you achieve a really good crit ratio, you can very much use the Izumo set as well. For the main sets on the Relics, for the body, you are primarily going to run crit rate. For the feet, this does depend. On a Silver Wolf team, ideally you want to run speed boots, as you want your elation characters to be faster, so the Aha instant can get a speed increase. Although it is a bit tricky to build Sparxie in a team of Silver Wolf and Yaoguang when they have like 200 speed when that's their goals. If assuming both Silver Wolf and Yaoguang are 200 speed, Sparxie would need around 148 to 149 speed. The less speed you have on Silver Wolf and Yaoguang in total, the less speed you would need on Sparxie, but you would have to do the calculation, and it depends from player to player. The reason for that is you do want Sparxie to outspeed the Aha instant, just so you can build up the punchline and have it be above 40. Although if you have a lot of investments, such as like E2 Sparxie and stuff, you would have less need of really doing it, so you can kind of just go down to a more generic breakpoint. but it's still overall recommended that you do build up to outspeed the first Aha instant, and also the further ones after that. However, if you are running her as a main DPS, you are pairing her with Sparkle always. In that case, you would never want to run speed. It is always going to be attack percent in that case. For the orb, you want to run attack percent, and for the link rope, you want to run energy regen rate. For the substats, if you are putting her on a Silver Wolf team, you want to focus on the speed, so you are once again aiming around the high 140s, so around 147. 147 to 148 is the generic reliable amount, so generally aiming for around that is going to usually be enough, but you just want to be sure you outspeed the Aha instant. And if you're running main DPS and or just attack percent boost in general for whatever case, then you would ignore the speed step entirely. Then comes the actual trace. To max it out, you need a total of 3600 attack, which is a lot harder to do on a Silver Wolf team, so if you don't fully get it, it's okay. But if you are able to get a bunch of rolls and stuff into it, and by it I mean attack, so you'd be focusing on attack percent rolls on the pieces where you can get it, then that's going to be very, very ideal. On the team with Sparkle and main DPS Sparxie, in that case, you are definitely going to want to hit it. There's not going to be much excuse there. So 3600 attack for the full elation conversion is going to be wanted. Do note, this is not something that you need before battle. So in battle, attack buffs, as long as they're not conversion ones where it would not apply, so percentage buffs on themselves, such as the one from Sparkle or even Hopeful Alt. Those are the ones that would be good here, and if you do reach that 3600 in battle, then you are good to go. Then you just focus on crit rate and crit damage. Crit rate, get it to 100% so you can guarantee all your attacks are critting. Crit damage, just get it to as high as you can. Ideally, aiming around 150% is going to be fine, and if you can go higher than that, that is going to be ideal. Now for some general team building ideas, I don't have Sparxie on my account, so pretend Asta here is Sparxie. Since it's simpler, I'm just going to get the main DPS out of the way first. The actual teammate that you always want for any Elation team is none other than Yaguang. She is practically just indispensable. Any Elation team is going to actually just see a significant drop off without the Queen Yaguang. So there's really not much you can do if you don't have her. And the other teammate would be Sparkle, as she is just perfect for Sparxie. Since you build Sparxie at base speed, Sparkle's action advance would be enough to get the turn. Sparkle provides so many skill points for Sparxie to burn through, and also has really good buffs, plus her own attack buff, which is going to be good for Sparxie's conversion. So these two teammates are practically just non-negotiable when it comes to main DPS Sparxie, especially now. Before, you could definitely sub them out a little more, which you still kind of can depending on your investment. It's just not going to be that great. Last thought goes to sustain. If you want to use a sustain on this team, it's going to be Huopo. You can use Permanent Donning, although his attack is based off his own for the buff, so it's not like percentage based, so it's not going to work on the actual Sparxie conversion. So do keep that in mind, but if you do need a sustain, Donning does work, but Full is best. So the team would look like this. If you're doing sustain this, then you can put someone here that does have buff/debuffs that do work. Those primarily being someone like Tribi or even someone like Cypher. Honestly, Asheville can even work with this big defense shred, and with investment stuff like vulnerability and such. Same thing applies to Mortanix Blade, as he does just go everywhere. Even though an okay amount of his buffs are damage percent, there is a massive 50% vulnerability and a massive 30% defense shred just for him being an ultimate, plus the capabilities he does provide on the team, plus also being a very strong DPS depending on how you build him. He also can be good for the sustainless slot. The best sustainless team you can do is also just the Elation Trailblazer, since the extra Elation skill you can give Sparxie is good, since Sparxie's actual Elation skill is the biggest part of her damage. So this can also work. It's just kind of gated by the fact that Elation MC is not too great. However, for a sustainless team, it can definitely work. And then if you are missing Yaguang here instead, you can also just use Elation MC in place here. So it'd be Elation MC, Sparxie, Sparkle, and then sustain or sustainless depending on what you're doing. Without Yaguang, it's going to see a big drop, but it is what it is. Now for Silver Wolf teams, I also don't have Silver Wolf SP, so I'm just going to use regular, actual, just Silver Wolf. So pretend Silver Wolf here is SP, pretend Asta here is instead Sparxie, and then the actual teammate is going to be Yaguang. As I mentioned, it's just a character you can't replace when it comes to Elation. Last slot, of course, just goes to sustain. Same thing as I mentioned before, it would just be Huopo, as her energy buff is good for Yaguang, good for Sparxie. Attack is good for Sparxie as well, but that's mainly the extent of it. You can just use whatever option you have best. Donning still also does work instead. For sustainless, when it comes to Silver Wolf specifically, funny enough, you can use Asta. Asta sustain the slot because of her massive speed buff, plus something like Hackerspace can help a lot of speed for Silver Wolf, and also just Yaguang. So for sustain the slots, it could be like that, or as I mentioned previously, you can throw in someone like Blade, as the stuff just works. Asheville, if you do have an okay amount of investment. Although Asheville is a bit more wonky in that side, you can use Cypher, you can use Tribi, so on and so forth. and also Elation Trailblazer. You can also use them as a sustain the slot on the team. They don't really do much for Silverwolf as opposed to someone like Evanesia, but they do work, so you can use them there. And then you can also kind of use them as a Yagong replacement. It's going to be a lot worse. And then the last slot would be a sustain, but that also does work. And that is the full 4.4 updated Sparxie guide. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you did, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this along with all the tips and content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.